Blackhawks get plagued by a Christmas hangover in Buffalo.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Do me a quick favor, go and hit that like button. Jump in the comment section down below as well. Mailbag Monday, of course, is right around the corner, so hit me with your Blackhawks-related question, and I'll make sure to bookmark it for next week's edition. Subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already as well. I'm really close to reaching my goal of 2,000 subscribers, so even if you're someone who regularly listens through an audio platform, please make the jump on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button for me. And last but certainly not least, got to give a shout out to today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. If you're not already a member, got to go and check out FanDuel.com right now to win $250 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Blackhawks looked like they were still sitting at the dinner table on Christmas last night as they returned to action in Buffalo to face off with the Sabres, a team that, as I had mentioned in my preview episode yesterday, had just lost 13 consecutive games before finally putting an end to that skid in their final game before the holiday break. They also sit dead last in the Eastern Conference standings, and they absolutely blew the doors off the Blackhawks right from the get-go. 6-2 final last night at the KeyBank Center as the Sabres roared out to a 4-0 lead early. Blackhawks, as they usually do following a horrendous stretch, found a way to make it semi-interesting late as Tyler Bertuzzi netted his 11th goal of the season, and Seth Jones also scored his first goal since returning from injury, but the Blackhawks went on to hand it right back to the Sabres only moments later, as they tend to do. Alex Tuch added his second and third goals of the game for the hat trick. Blackhawks have now lost 5 consecutive road games in 11 of their last 12 on the road, dating back to the first week of November. And after winning 3 consecutive games at home, looked like they were trending in the right direction. They've now dropped 3 consecutive games here in a row on the road, with one of their worst performances of the entire season coming last night in Buffalo. As far as what went wrong, it's easy to pinpoint what went wrong for the Blackhawks. The opening 20 minutes truly is one of the worst periods I've ever watched. And believe me, as someone who's been covering the Blackhawks since 2020, I've seen a lot of bad periods. And last night's opening 20 minutes might just take the cake. The Blackhawks didn't even look like a professional team. They took a page out of the Bears playbook, right? Get on national television and then look like an absolute joke. Blackhawks finally give their fans a nationally broadcasted game to tune into against a lowly team like the Sabres, who, as I outlined as well in my preview, I thought it was a really good opportunity considering what the Sabres had went through for the Blackhawks to get back on track. But funny enough, it wound up being the exact opposite. And I talked about how there was this when you smell blood, you got to go and step on your opponent type of speech yesterday. I had someone in the comment section say that's the speech that the Sabres coach has probably given his team, and funny enough, that looked like the mentality that bunch came out with last night. Blackhawks survived the opening 10 minutes playing with fire, but then they ended up getting burned in the final 10. 4 consecutive goals for the Sabres in those final 10 and a half minutes put the Blackhawks in a 4-0 hole. They only mustered up 2 shots on goal total in the opening 20 minutes. It was absolutely pathetic and hard to watch. A true Christmas hangover for the Blackhawks. And it's hard enough for them to win games when they do get off to good starts. So falling behind 4-0, falling behind at all is not a recipe for success. The Blackhawks only have 2 come from behind victories total this season, only one of them on the road. Just can't afford to have sloppy starts like that, and it's even all the more embarrassing considering it came against the Sabres team that has truly looked like one of the worst teams as well in the NHL over the last month or so. What also went wrong for the Blackhawks is Peter Mrazek folks might unfortunately still be injured. Right after I, for Christmas in my Blackhawks Christmas list episode, wished for healthy goaltenders the rest of the way, Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times mentioned that Mrazek looked like he was still having some difficulties with his groin, wound up toughing it out in the first period despite surrendering 4 goals, none of which you can really blame on him. A lot of defensive shoddiness out of the Blackhawks, which I'll get to here in just a second. But after the opening 20 minutes, Arvid Soderblom trotted out onto the ice in replacement of Peter Mrazek. And it just seems like this groin injury, as they tend to do, especially for goaltenders, is lingering for him right now, which is rather unfortunate because, as I tweeted out last night, Drew Commesso pitched his first shutout of the season for the Rockford Ice Hogs. He's gone 2-0-1 over his last 3 games and only surrendered 2 goals during that stretch. Seems like he's finally getting comfortable and finding his footing again at the AHL level now that he's been able to return in one place and have some sort of consistency in his life. Hopefully Peter Mrazek doesn't have anything that'll keep him out long term or have him miss any time, because with Laurent Brossoit still out as well, that would mean Drew Commesso would have to come back up from Rockford. I hope that's not the case, but it does seem like Peter Mrazek is still dealing with something here. I'd anticipate Arvid Soderblom gets the start on Sunday against the Dallas Stars, but going to be very interesting to see what happens when the Hawks face off against the Blues on Tuesday in the Winter Classic. What also went wrong for the Blackhawks last night is they only mustered up a whopping 17 shots on net, and I'm sure some of you remember one of my keys to victory for the Blackhawks was to be aggressive, get the puck on cage as much as possible. Certainly doesn't help that they didn't play with the puck all that much until like the second half of the game. The latter stages of the second period, the third period, they came with a good push. They didn't have the puck enough, but even when they did, I didn't think they were firing it on cage like they needed to. UPL had himself a relatively easy night, stopping 15 of the 17 shots that he faced. One of my keys was to not let UPL have an easy type of game. I know there were a lot of other things that went wrong for the Blackhawks, but 17 shots on goal just isn't going to get it done in today's day and age in the NHL. Last but certainly not least, what went wrong for the Blackhawks was it was a tough night for their young defensemen. Rare tough night for Alex Vlasic, who was on the ice for 4 goals against. Had a tough giveaway at his own blue line that led to Alex Tuch's hat-trick goal. Also was kind of caught standing around on Zach Benson's opening goal of the game. A game to forget for Alex Vlasic. He had the worst game score of any player on the Blackhawks in this one, which again, I don't think he was their worst player in this game. Goes to show you why analytics are a little bit flawed, but I still do like utilizing them to help tell a full story. Kevin Korchinski also had some rookie mistakes, albeit one of them was kind of when he was forced to be aggressive late in the third period with his team trailing by a couple of goals, but a little bit of a tough night for him. But I'll tell you what, it's okay when Alex Vlasic has an off night. He's been phenomenal, and as a 23-year-old, he's still going to have those hiccups. We know that's going to be part of the learning curve for Kevin Korchinski as well, and he's looked much better in this stint than he had basically all of last year. But for a defenseman like TJ Brodie to be as inconsistent as he's been on the back end when he's supposed to be one of the veteran leaders on the blue line, it's absolutely unacceptable. Terrible play out in front of his own net on Zach Benson's opening goal. Just caught getting beat in transition a couple of times, took another penalty, and he's had problems staying out of the penalty box. I don't know how TJ Brodie continues to dress on a regular basis, and I think he has to be healthy scratch next game against the Minnesota Wild. Louis Crevier needs to get back in. You don't want him being out of the lineup too much as a 7th defenseman, and I think this is a no-brainer spot to get him back in the lineup. I know Anders Sorensen says he likes the puck moving and the willingness to shoot out of TJ Brodie, and truthfully, he has been better as of late, but there's still too many deficiencies, and he's too big of a liability considering what he's being paid, and also to be one of the veterans that's expected to hold it down with a lot of youngsters back there on defense as well. He's just not getting it done. He's just not good enough right now, and you want to preach accountability, Anders Sorensen. You got to preach it to your veterans as well. And I know it's not easy to sit TJ Brodie, but he's just not good enough right now. And quite honestly, Wyatt Kaiser's been better than he's been this year, but Kaiser has to go down to Rockford because Brody's making $3.75 million for the next 2 years. There's nothing they can really do with him. So enough is enough, in my opinion. I've seen enough out of TJ Brody. If you're preaching accountability, Anders Sorensen, preach it to everyone. I think it's a no-brainer time to get Louis Crevier back in. Maybe even reunite him with Alex Vlasic on the top pairing, as I'll get to in segment 3. But there's my breakdown of the Blackhawks with an awful performance in a 6-2 loss to the Sabres in their return from the Christmas break. Coming up in just a moment, despite the Blackhawks looking putrid, I'll talk about Connor Bedard continuing to produce despite the lack of team success. But first, I do got to talk to you all real quick about Game Time. The holidays are here, and there's no better way to enjoy it as a family by getting down to the United Center together for some Blackhawks hockey. Me, my brother, and my mom are actually headed to a game here right after Christmas, and the best way for you all to purchase holiday tickets is through Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to your favorite live events, not just hockey games, even easier. And Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I personally have used Game Time since I was in high school. It's always been the cheapest and easiest way for me to purchase all of my tickets, whether I'm going to see the Blackhawks, the Cubs, or any team in any city. They also have views from every seat in the venue, which I greatly appreciate, so that way I know exactly what to expect before I arrive and also just before I make my purchase. I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app, and when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off with your first purchase. You can get $20 off to go and see Connor Bedard at the United Center this year by using the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps when you download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. Segment 2, despite the Blackhawks having arguably their worst performance of the season last night in Buffalo, as it was actually just the third time all season they didn't have the lead, were tied or trailed by only 1 goal going into the third period. Despite all of that, Connor Bedard and the top line continue to have success. They had a very active game and showed good chemistry with one another. Undoubtedly, the most effective trio for the Blackhawks in this game. We saw Connor Bedard extend his point streak to 3 games with a secondary assist on Tyler Bertuzzi's goal. He also led the Blackhawks with 4 shots on goal, 6 individual shot attempts, 4 individual scoring chances, and a .33 individual expected goals for in 20 minutes and 11 seconds of time on ice. And with this nice stretch, Connor Bedard is now up to 31 points, 9 goals, and 22 assists in 36 games so far this season to lead the Blackhawks in points, also leads the Blackhawks in assists as well. He also has 8 more points than Teuvo Teravainen, who's second on the Blackhawks in points, so a pretty good margin as the leading point scorer. And he now has 16 points over his past 15 games, dating back to November 27th, Black Wednesday, just before Thanksgiving. Just continues to look so much better. He's got 6 goals during that stretch as well, so as I expected, the goal scoring has started to come to life. I like that the playmaking has been noticeable this year and has continued to take an uptick from when we first saw him arrive onto the NHL scene as a rookie. The playmaking has been really nice, and it's really been the driving force of his offensive production this year since the goal scoring has been down. And I do still think there's room for growth and more production in the goal scoring department. Just a matter of kind of getting a couple more breaks and electing to shoot the puck a little bit more. I think there have been some times where he's tried to get too cute and made the extra pass when he needs to realize he's the best shooter, best goal scorer, best player on this team. He's got to be firing the biscuit. But 16 points now over the past 15 games. Nice to see Connor Bedard find a groove, find some consistency after it was a really frustrating latter half of October and basically the entire month of November. And I think it's also fitting that as he's kind of picked up his production, so have Tyler Bertuzzi and Taylor Hall. And I'm so happy to see these 3 together, especially Bertuzzi and Bedard. I've been preaching it on this show since the start of the year. I mean, it kind of only makes sense considering what the Blackhawks gave Tyler Bertuzzi in the offseason, but nice to see Bertuzzi really find his footing here over the last few weeks as well after it was just a horrendous start to his Blackhawks tenure. He had a beautiful top shelf snipe last night to get the Blackhawks on the board. His 11th goal of the season also ties Ryan Donato now for the team lead. It gives him 5 points over the last 4 games. And out of the 18 points that he's totaled in 36 games this year, 11 have come in 15 games since Thanksgiving. So just like Connor Bedard, he's really started to pick it up here as of late. Blackhawks offense has gotten much better as a whole. And Taylor Hall continues to be awesome. He had a really nifty zone entry to set up Bertuzzi for that goal last night. That now gives Hall 5 assists over his last 3 games. And I think the biggest thing for Hall, not only like Bertuzzi has it been the consistency, we're seeing him impact games much more on a nightly basis, but the speed and the offensive abilities have been on display much more often over these last couple of weeks. And the Blackhawks really need help in the speed department. So to see Hall be assertive and carry pucks into the offensive zone, I mean, even the setup last night that he had to Bertuzzi is a perfect encapsulation of what I'm talking about. Nice stick handling through a couple of defenders to create some space for himself that allows him the opportunity to look up and recognize what's happening in front of him, sees Tyler Bertuzzi with some open space himself, sets him up, and Bertuzzi does the rest with a beautiful snipe to get the Blackhawks on the board. We're seeing those type of impacts, those type of primary assists, finding teammates in the dangerous areas much more frequently out of Taylor Hall here as of late. And out of his 19 points that he's accumulated out on the year, 13 of them have come in the past 15 games since Thanksgiving. That hat trick that he had against the Dallas Stars really seemed to get him going. So nice to see Hall, Bertuzzi, and Bedard producing with more regularity here as of late, and really hope that top line continues to find success with one another, because in my opinion, that is the ideal top line for the Blackhawks, in my opinion, again, right here, right now. Also wanted to be sure to give a shout out to Lukas Reichel, who picked up a secondary assist on Seth Jones's goal last night. Jones's 3rd goal of the season, as I mentioned, his first since returning from injury. But that now gives Reichel assists in back-to-back games here. Nice to see him producing a little bit more after it was kind of a dry stretch, 9 consecutive games for him without a point. I actually thought Philip Kurashev as well, who did draw back into the lineup. I mentioned I thought it was a possibility for him to get back in there, and if he did, I thought on the 4th line with Lukas Reichel and Pat Maroon would be a really good spot for him, as Reichel's worked well with Craig Smith, who skated really much better than I thought he was going to so far this season. Philip Kurashev has some pretty decent wheels. I thought that would be a really good spot for him to get back in the lineup after being scratched for 4 consecutive games. He did draw back in, and I thought he actually had a pretty good game. He had 3 individual scoring chances, 2 individual high danger chances as well. Was one of the more involved and noticeable Blackhawks forwards on a night where outside of the top line, no one was really all that noticeable. So I'd anticipate Philip Kurashev is going to get another crack at it on Sunday against the Dallas Stars. Pat Maroon, by the way, wanted to give a shout out to him as well for snapping a 10-game point drought with his with a primary assist on Seth Jones's goal. And like I said, I think that 4th line did enough to see them run it back on Sunday when the Blackhawks return to the United Center to face off with the Dallas Stars. And speaking of tomorrow's matchup with the Dallas Stars, coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I wrap up today's show, I'll get into a preview and talk about everything you need to know before puck drops tomorrow against the Dallas Stars. But first, real quick, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And FanDuel now has so many ways for you to pick up a W. Personally, I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. But FanDuel also has bets for player props, money lines, game specials, and so much more. To go and take advantage of this amazing offer before Week 18 closes, go and visit FanDuel.com right now to join today. Again, that's FanDuel.com for a chance to win $250 in bonus bets simply if your first $5 bet wins. So make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your weekend. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey down in the description, or simply search on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 3, after a brutal 3-game road trip, the Blackhawks return home to the United Center on Sunday to take on the Dallas Stars in their final game of preparation before facing off with the St. Louis Blues on New Year's Eve at Wrigley Field for the Winter Classic. Dallas, like the Blackhawks, returned to action from the holiday pause last night, taking on the Minnesota Wild, where they fell 3-2 in overtime. And as I broke down on Thursday's show, where I went into an update over every team in the Central Division, the Stars currently sit in 4th place in the Central Division with a 13-1 record through their opening 34 games. That currently gives them 41 points and has them sitting as the top wild card seed in the Western Conference. Sunday's meeting between these two teams is actually going to be the 4th and final matchup of the season already. It's a 7:30 p.m. Central Time puck drop, by the way, and will be televised on ESPN, so yay! The Blackhawks on national TV once again. Hopefully they don't embarrass themselves like Chicago teams have apparently gotten so accustomed to doing here as of late. But yeah, the 4th and final meeting between these two teams already this year. The first two, both in Dallas, resulted in wins for the Stars. The last meeting, though, as the season series shifted over to the United Center, the Blackhawks took down Dallas 6-2 on Black Wednesday. I'm sure some of you remember Taylor Hall that night with a hat trick, his first as a member of the Blackhawks. I believe it was his first in like 9 years as well. So we'll see if the home team narrative stays true in the final matchup between these teams when they face off on Sunday night. As far as the Stars lineup, obviously I'm recording this on Saturday morning, so it's a little bit of a guesstimate as of right now, but based on, these are the lines that the Stars rolled with last night as they returned to action. Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, and Maverick Bork from the 2020 NHL draft. Had to think back. I don't know why that took me so long. Serve as the Stars' top line. Mason Marshman, Matt Duchene, their leading scorer, and Blackhawks legend Colin Blackwell make up the second line. Jamie Benn, Wyatt Johnston, and Evgeny Dadonov make up the third line. And then Oscar Back, Sam Steele, and Logan Stankoven round things out on the fourth line. Really deep forward group here for the Stars, and they're also without Tyler Seguin. So 4 lines that they feel real comfortable does head coach Pete DeBoer in rolling out in any situation. Defensively for the Stars, Thomas Harley, Miro Heiskanen as the top pairing, Asa Lindell and Niels Lundqvist as the second pairing, and then Liam Bichelle, who I'm admittedly not all that familiar with, and Ilya Lyubushkin round things out. Matt Dumba injured currently on the back end for the Stars. Jake Ottinger figures to be the one that gets the nod in between the pipes, although he did start last night against Minnesota, so maybe they elect to go with backup Casey DeSmith, which would probably be a little bit of a blessing in disguise for us Blackhawks fans. For the Blackhawks lineup, even though it was a dreadful performance last night at the KeyBank Center, I don't really think I'd anticipate any changes with the forward lines. I think Taylor Hall, Connor Bedard, and Tyler Bertuzzi have to remain as the top line. Maybe we see a change up between Nick Foligno, Frank Nazar, and Ryan Donato, but quite honestly, I'd run them back once again. They're only one game, last game didn't go all that well for them, but the game prior, they were easily the best line of the 4 for the Blackhawks in that one. Frank Nazar picked up his first NHL assist and his first point of the season, so I'd be willing to run them back one more time. Teuvo Teravainen, Jason Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev, I'd expect to be the third line. If we're going to get any change whatsoever in the forward group, Blackhawks fans, it's going to be here. It would be Teuvo and Mikheyev being bumped up with Frank Nazar, while Foligno and Donato swap down to the third line with Jason Dickinson. I don't expect there to be a change, but if there is, that will be the one up front. And then I anticipate Pat Maroon, Lucas Reichel, and Philip Kurashev rounding things out on the fourth line with Joey Anderson being the healthy scratch. On the back end, I don't know if I can say I'd expect TJ Brodie to be a healthy scratch watching from the press box, but I sure hope that it would be the case considering how poor defensively he's been for basically all season. Assuming that he would be the scratch like I want him to be, I think it's a perfect spot to get Louis Crevier back in and put him on the top pairing with Alex Vlasic. Because even though I don't think he's a top pairing guy, as I've said on the show, and I don't even really know if he's an NHL defenseman, yeah, he moves well for a 6'7" blue liner and also for a 7th round pick. His development has been immaculate, but I think he's in over his head a little bit on the top pairing. However, the Blackhawks were winning games when he was up there with Alex Vlasic. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's reunite Louis Crevier and Alex Vlasic. That also allows Nolan Allen to be back with Connor Murphy. And as I broke down from the analytics, courtesy of the fine folks over at Money Puck on yesterday's episode, Allen and Murphy have been outstanding with one another so far this year. So I'd really like to see them back. And then that also would allow Seth Jones to go down on the third pairing. You don't have to utilize them as a true third pairing. Obviously, Jones is a primary minute muncher for this team, but you could allow him to play with Kevin Korchinski. I think this just kind of allows the depth to show a little bit more on the back end for the Blackhawks, and you let TJ Brodie watch a game from the press box, get the message a little bit, and hopefully he returns for the Winter Classic potentially a little bit more rejuvenated and puts together a little bit better performance in the defensive zone. In net for the Blackhawks with Peter Mrazek struggles, Soderblom did allow a softie, a real backbreaker after the Hawks got 2 goals to cut their deficit to 4-2. Maybe they'd have some life late. We'd seen them have some late third period comebacks under Anders Sorensen thus far. Soderblom does allow a softie, Alex Tuch's second of the game, but still he came in and stopped, I want to say it was 21 of the 23 shots that he faced. I know he had a save percentage in the 900, so Soderblom continues to be strong. I'd anticipate he gets the start here against the Stars. Going to be interesting to see what happens for the Blackhawks in goal on the Winter Classic when they face off with the St. Louis Blues. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Everyone, again, thank you all for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Really close to achieving my goal of 2,000 subscribers. You can follow the podcast for free wherever you listen to your podcast as well. If you want to check me out on X, you can find me at Jack Bushman 2. For my Strictly Blackhawks account, go and follow at Talkin' Hockey. That way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekends. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.